All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 5, part 1 of our broadcast, or part 2, I would say, of our broadcast. It'll be okay. And today we're talking about actually form validation for the first time. Hey, Tom, welcome. So when we look at the activities so far that we've done, we've completed contact list Crud, and we talked about that last time. So we did create, read, update, delete with our contact list. Let's bring up our project from last time. So I'm just going to bring it up here, and I encourage you to do the same. So let's open recent. We're going to go into 5B. That's the one we had. And I'm just going to launch Light Server so we can see what that looks like. Here it is. So if you go to contact us right now, we have a little message box and show contact list. And then what we can do is we can add, delete. If we click add, it modifies the page to say add, and it does all this stuff. This is where we left off last day. And this is part of your in-class exercise for this week. Okay, so that's what we started with. But one of the problems we have right now is form validation is terrible. It means I can put in like 2 characters and go through, and I don't care about a last name, contact number, I can just skip over, email I can skip over, and this is not great. Form isn't beautiful. It's not a beautiful form. And anyway, but I mean, at least it should function is, where we're going with this, right? So, and the same thing goes with when we add something to the contact list, I can move from one form input to the next, and who cares? Nothing's going to stop me. We need to do better. And the way we're going to do it today is we're going to use something called regular expressions. So let's get back to that PowerPoint for a second. So if you skip down to, I would say, page 7 of the PowerPoint, we're going to start in there. There's a lot of extra pages here that I put in, but the main thing I want to hit this week is regular expressions and form validation and what it can help us with. So what are regular expressions? They're patterns, and they're used for matching and manipulating strings. So I want to search for something in a string. I want to match something in a string. I want to constrain something in a particular string. There's lots of ways to do it, but what we do is we use something called regular expressions. You may have had exposure to them in other courses, in other languages. For example, you may have had them in Java or C# or C++, but we're going to talk about them again, and maybe in a little bit more detail than you're used to in JavaScript and jQuery. So how do they look? Typically, you have some kind of variable, for example, URL protocol, and it starts and ends with forward slashes. That's how the form looks for regular expressions. So that's what they start and end with. And then we can also use something called the regular expression constructor. So there's a couple ways to set it up. I can do it this way, and this is like me creating a regular expression, or I can use a regular expression constructor to make one. It's either way is okay. If I use the regular expression constructor, then I would say, hey, this is my regular expression name. So this is like my pattern. And this is, I'm going to use the new keyword and regular expression. This is the reg express or regex, if you want to say the constructor. This day and age, it'd be nice if JavaScript made this bigger, but it's okay. And then we pass in the pattern that we're looking for in here. And then what we can do is, if I want to do a search on the URL, so I take the URL, which is a string, I can perform a search and apply a pattern to it. And that's one way of using the search method of any string. And if I use the search method, I can search through a string with a particular pattern. So if I want to search for something, let's say, for example, I want to search for your name in a string, it'll tell me where, it'll return the first iteration of where it's returned. So that's what we can use regular expressions for, not just for patterns, but also for searching, which is really useful. All right, so that's one. The other thing we can do is we can use the test method There's the test method and the execute method. So it also has these two. So the test method, this is any regular expression. I can say basically, okay, here's my pattern, right? Or here's my a Boolean, and I can use a test to pass in a string that I that I want to test. That's how it works. Okay. So basically, it would be like this. Here's my email pattern, and you can see that there's like these funny marks that you get with the email pattern, right? And let me just make this a little bit bigger here for you guys to see it just a little bit better. There we go. And these funny marks that we see in the email pattern, basically, remember, we have to start with a / and end with a /. That's typically how we do it. We have a bunch of other stuff in between, and it uses some special meta characters to start matching stuff in a particular string. So here's my email pattern first. Then I actually have my email that I want to check. I have a result variable that I want to store if it's true or false. And then what I do is I take my email pattern and I use the test on it. So to the test method on the email pattern now is a regular expression because once I apply this to it, and by the way, notice that there isn't any quotation marks around this thing. This is not a string. As soon as I put a / and another / JavaScript will recognize this thing as a regular expression. Okay. And then what I can do is I can test the email, so the string, I can pass the string into it, and I can test to see that it passes the pattern for the email, that I've kind of constructed here in my email pattern, in this regular expression. And then, of course, it'll return either true or false. This is a very simple test. There's other ways, of course, to write this. We can use a ternary operator or something else. But at the end of the day, that's how it would work. We're going to use something like this test shortly. We also have something called meta characters in regular expressions, and they look like this. So the dot, right, matches any single character. So any character. \, it says, identifies the next character as a literal value. Okay. The caret, which is this little up arrow thing, matches characters at the beginning of the string. So we can kind of force characters at the beginning of the string to look in a certain way. The $sign matches characters at the end of the string. So I can check if I want a string to start with something, I would use a caret. If I want it to end with something, I would use a $sign, right? And round brackets or parentheses specifies required characters to include in a pattern match. I need these ones to be there. That's round brackets. Square brackets, on the other hand, specifies alternate characters that are allowed in a pattern match. Okay, and then other things here that we can use as well. And sometimes we use the dash. So if I want to say between two types of characters, let's say a lowercase a and a lowercase z, we can use a dash, and that says we want a range of characters that I'm going to match. That's typically how it works. So that's meta characters when we start writing regular expressions. So again, the period or the dot matches any single character in a pattern and specifies that the pattern must contain a value where the period is located. I must have some kind of value in a specific spot. All right, as anything, it could be whatever I want. And there's a couple of other things. I'm going to skip through this, go to this one. I also have other meta characters when it comes to things like quantifiers. So quantifiers is like, how many do I want? A question mark specifies that the thing that came before it, whatever the pattern is that came before it, is optional. So if I have some kind of character matching sequence before, because I'm building an expression. That's why it's called regular expression. I'm building an expression. I'm going to, kind of put things together, as an example. And as I put my expression together, it matches a certain, group of, strings, and then it returns whether it's true or false. Okay, pass or fail. Again, the plus, anything that comes before the plus, it specifies one or more of the preceding characters must match. So there's no, it's not optional. Like optional is question mark, Must is a plus, anything that comes before. Star is that 0 or more preceding characters can match. So I can have 0, I can have none of them, or I can have, some. And then anything in curly braces, again, this is just for quantifiers. If I just put a single character in a single number in curly braces, it specifies that the preceding character repeat exactly this number of times. I have to have exactly five numbers, or 5 letters, or 5 whatever I want. Let's say I'm using the number 5. If I put a number with a comma, it says that the preceding character repeat at least n times. Not exactly, but at least. This is exactly. I want exactly 5. No more, no less. This one is going to be at least, this many times. And then I can give it a range, right? So at least this many times, but no more than this many times. So a good example of using this would be something like a password. I want at least 8 characters, maximum 16 characters in a password. That kind of thing. Okay, and let's continue here with some other things. We also can define other parts of the expression. And sometimes we have these special escape characters that help us write an expression, because it's going to be the same if I want to say all numeric or all alphanumeric characters. An example of this would be, I want some kind of alphanumeric character, right? So that is, 0 to 9 and A to Z, both uppercase and lowercase, right? That is lowercase w. So some kind of alphanumeric character I need, right? And then any character that is not alphanumeric, so some other kind of things, dots, other operators, all those other things I could put in this capital W. If I only want numeric characters, let's say I'm making a phone number pattern, then I can put / lowercase d, right? And that would match only numbers. So that's it. No other types of characters. And if I want to be the opposite again, I would say any non-numeric character. I could say that as well. That would match a bunch of other stuff. If I want white space included, if white spaces are included, like space bar, if I want to press a space, or all printable characters, or any backspace character, these are all escape sequences that I can use to specify, again, more matches in my regular expression. So one of the questions I have from Nick is, so because of 2 forward slashes, it recognizes regex? Yes, it does. I'm hoping these tables are going to be helpful for you, because it helps. Let's take a look at some common ones in a second. I also have the G flag at the end. You can put different flags at the end of the regular expression as well. G basically says that to search for all possible matches within a string. I want to search for all possible matches. I ignores the case. I don't care if it's uppercase or lowercase. That's what it means. That's what I means. And I also have M, which is multi-line, if I want to search across multiple lines, and so on. Okay, so that's a couple of things that we can put in. So let's see some common expressions. So here's a phone number expression. Here's a phone number expression. An email address expression. A password strength expression. And a username expression. Okay. So those are different examples I've given you, and we can use some of these. We're going to make a full name expression and see how that looks. Okay, a full name expression. And I want to start with that because that's the first thing that we kind of put together as an example. And I want to think about this in terms of how it's going to, something that's going to work. We also want to be able to test our regular expression. So I'm just going to type in test regular expression, and I want to do it online, right? So a lot of times what we can do is there's some free regular expression testers, right, as an example, and I'm just going to give you one. Here's one. So it's regex101.com, where I can enter my regular expression here, and then I can have a test string, and it can tell us if it's matching or not. Okay, so this is just one website out of many that'll do the same thing. So example would be if I put in my name, so let's say I put in my name, and I start testing for stuff where I put in my regular expression up here, and then notice it has the beginning slash and the end slash, so I don't need to put those in. And let's start testing for the first character. So I want to say that the first character in my name, right, as an example, starts with a capital A to a capital Z. Okay, so that's the first character. All right. And I want to see if there's a match. Notice that it matches here and it matches here because those two areas are capital A to Z. So that's the first part of my regular expression. I want the second character sequence, to be A to Z, as an example, lowercase. So any lowercase character after that. So you can see that Tom, T-O matches. All right, those are the two things. So first, some kind of sequence of A to Z. It must be capital, and then followed by a lowercase character, because that's how normally we would do, right? I'm going to put the plus symbol in here. Remember what the plus symbol means, right? So if I go back, let's take a look at what the plus symbol means. We go back to this one. Specifies that one or more of the preceding characters must match. All right, that's what I'm saying. One or more must match with this one. Okay, good. Now, this is, if I put brackets, I need to have, I'm saying this is what I need to have. I must have this. Brackets or parentheses are required. I must have a space, is what it says. I must have a space, right? Or sometimes what we have is, and you can put an or, which is a pipe. So or, that's a pipe, or a comma, all right? So those are the two things I would accept. Something like first name, comma, last name, or, one of those things. If you don't like a comma, so I don't want commas, I just want first name and last name, as an example, then you can take the comma out. But right now I have a space or a comma. Again, this is the sequence. This is how I would build it up. And the next one would be what the next thing I need to require is. Okay, well, the next one is going to be some kind of A to Z sequence again. So there's the A to Z sequence. So I need the next character to be capitalized because that makes sense because I have at least this in my name, okay? Followed by a series of characters, right, as an example. So a series of characters, A to Z, right? Some kind of character that's A to Z, okay? So that takes care of basic names. That'll take care of most anything. And it'll tell you on the left here if it matches or not, which is pretty cool, right? But that is, notice how I wrote it. I kind of put together, slowly my regular expression until I have something that matches most names. Let's try another name, right? So we can try other names for testing. Let's say, for example, Al Low, right? Does it match or not, right? And if it does, then it's good. But what about if I say A, B? Does that match? And you can see that doesn't match because we don't have, if I look at this line here, this line doesn't have any matches at all, right? Because why? I don't have the sequence that I'm looking for here. Okay, now I want the total number of characters as an example. The total number of characters for the entire sequence to be something like between a minimum of, of one character. Well, look, I've already told you I need at least two characters here. Here I need at least two characters. So really, I don't want to, I'm not specifying how many I'm going to put in my name, right? I can put many, many characters in here and it's not going to care, right? All right, so what about if I said, if at the end, right, if I said, I want a minimum of one character and a maximum of 50 characters, right? Or let's say maximum 10 characters. I'm okay, right, to a certain point. Let's take a look and see what this matches. It says, so this is up to here, it matches, right? Look at that, up to there. Why? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Well, why? Because what is this last part matching? Is it matching the whole thing? Or is it just matching the little square brackets? Well, it's matching just the little square brackets, just these right here. The last expression, that's right here. I know it's hard to see because of the color coding, but, and maybe I'll make it bigger so you guys can see this, okay? But what you can see here is clearly that this part, this last part, which is the range, right? It says, I want between 1 and 10 characters. See how this area is blue, but only up to my O? Why? Because I must have the first character, right? But the second group of characters, which are A to Z, I can only have up to 10. That's what it means. That's a problem, right? And this is where we start thinking about where regular expressions actually are bad, because I want to be able to be inclusive and match as many names as possible. Some people's names, depending on the country they come from or the culture, you might have a first name, 2 middle names, and 2 last names separated by dashes, right? It could be anything, right? So there's a lot of possibilities, and we have to give at least the minimums is what I'm looking for regular expressions. Things that make sense, some kind of first name and last name, I think makes sense here. But this sequence here, if I limit it to how many characters, I'm basically saying that the last part, which is from here to here, this last square brackets from A to Z, lowercase, right? There's a minimum of 1 character and a maximum of 10. Okay? So that's what it means, right? But what about if I want the entire sequence, to match? Is there something I can do to put brackets around everything? Like, what if I put square brackets around the whole thing, right? So square brackets around the whole thing. Now we have a problem. No, nothing matches because it says 1 to 10, minimum 1, maximum 10. Okay, let's expand this, right? Because there's like none of it that matches, right? When I put square brackets around the whole thing, right, it says my regular expression does not match anything, no string at all. Okay, what about if I put round brackets? Put round brackets around, because round brackets, in math, they mean something. All right, you're like, okay, cool. So it says I want at least 1, maximum 10. Okay, well, it says that this one is 1, 2, 3, space, that's 4, 5, 6. Well, how come it doesn't do the whole thing, right? It kind of takes this whole expression and tries to resolve it, and it looks like it's not really providing a great, kind of sequence. It doesn't go beyond TS for me, which is really weird because I would think that it's going to be better, right? So that would be, interesting. Yeah, hyphens. There's a lot of stuff that can go in between as well. Like, you can see that this is an issue. So let's undo those changes. So now we can go back to, let's just go back to the original way of doing it. This is the one where I match everything, but the last group is this, right? So we have to be careful is what I'm saying. When I look at the entire matching set, right? You could combine it, say like, the first group, the first set, which is this set, the set of letters, behind, I need at least one capital character, and then at least, let's say, some amount of characters, 20, let's say, or something like that. A name with 20 characters. Here's, capital, maybe a name with 20 characters at the end of those. So that you can do. So you can say, well, okay, at least 1 A to Z, maximum 10. Okay, cool. Maximum 10. Well, maybe I want to say maximum 20. Maximum 20 fills in this blank, no problem. And then what if I did the same thing? What if I said, I want a sequence of characters from minimum of 1, maximum 20, right? So I don't want more than 20 characters in my first name and 20 characters in my last name. That's what this means. Followed by, some kind of space. I need a space or a comma, and you can also put a comma and a space, like different kinds of things that you can, other matching patterns here. But that pretty much matches this. So this doesn't match because it's too short. Let's try other ones. So if I say something like Tom T, right? That doesn't match at all, right? Tom T doesn't match at all. Tom matches. Tom 2 is okay. Tom T, not good, right? Tom Lowe, no problem. You know, there's other kinds of things that match, right? If I put CC, that matches, right? So some kind of matching things. But other things, if I put like a lowercase 0 or 0 and an A followed by a space and a 0 and an A, doesn't match. Doesn't matter what I put in here afterwards because I'm not allowing any zeros or anything in here. So that's how it would work. So keep this in mind when it comes to pattern matching. So this is the one we want to use. Again, I'm thinking 20 characters for the first name and 20 characters for the last name, plus a space in between. That's like 41 characters. If you really want to be technical, you could allow 50. So you can say this is like 51 characters, right? 50 plus a space, 51 characters, right? And that would give a lot of room, right? What about if I had other things? Like let's say I had 3 names. So some kind of first name followed by, first name, followed by a space, followed by a last name, you know, or a middle name, let's say middle name, followed by a last name, followed by another last name, right? And followed by another last name. Is that okay? Right? And so that is some things that match. It matches this part, right, as an example. But here, let's take this last name away. So last name followed by a space, followed by a last name, followed by a space, followed by a last name. Look, last name. Well, it covers this and it covers this. So I can do a first name, a middle name, a last name, followed by a last name. Okay, what about if I do a dash last name? So dash, some kind of hyphen, right? Well, that doesn't compute, right? That kind of cuts this thing out. So we need other things in here as well. So maybe a thing or a dash. So we'll put that in there, or some kind of hyphen. That includes hyphenated names up here. So that kind of does that. That's the hyphen that Nicholas is talking about here. So it includes hyphenated names, right? But it only allows me to have X number of characters. You can see that another space and another last name, you know, as an example, probably won't go this far. Why? Because we have a maximum amount of characters here, right? So if I had like a middle name and then a last name dash last name, or 2 middle names, and then let's do that. So I say, like, instead of a last name, here's this one. And if I said a middle name, another middle name, and then last name dash last name, it wouldn't work. And it wouldn't work because of the number of characters, not because of this. It actually says 50 to 1 to 70 characters position, 51 to 70, 30 to 50, right? It's a lot of characters in here, right? And the last name dash last name doesn't seem to work. So what if I increased it to something bigger? So let's say I want to go bigger. So 30 characters in the first part, and let's say 30 characters in the last part. Somehow it doesn't work. Doesn't work, right? And so we can have optional components in here as well as I create this, you know, this big name. It's not the number of characters per area, right? You know, maybe what we want is some kind of optional middle, you know, as an example that we want to put in as well. Again, it's how far you want to take this. The more complex this is going to be, as an example, and let's take a look at optionals. So we know that specifies that 0 or more of the preceding characters can match. That's what it says. Something preceding, okay? 0 or more of the preceding characters can match at the end, right? So again, we can put that in. The other one is, if I go back to here, specifies that the preceding character is optional. The preceding character is optional. So I want to have some kind of characters that are optional at the end, right? So some kind of space, if I'm going to do a space at all, right? And remember, we also had the brackets. Brackets tells us, specifies alternate characters allowed in a pattern match, specifies required characters to include in a pattern match. if I'm going to say it's required at the end, right? And the other thing so this is something we can continue to build when it comes to this. So I say, okay, I need at least this, right? But you know what? If I want to also add alternates, right, for something that comes, so this plus, right, it says matches between 1 and 25 times, as many as possible, giving back as needed. That's what this part is, right? And I want to say that when I go to the plus, it says 1 or more of the preceding characters, 1 or more. I want to say none or more, 0 or more of the preceding characters can match, right? 0 or more of the preceding characters can match. What if I did that? So I said, okay, so after this string, as an example, I want 1 or more of the preceding characters. I want to put a plus in there, right? So it's processing. We're pretty good. And then I want to do the same thing here. I want to say that I want to do some kind of this thing again afterwards, right? So this is the pattern that I'm going to use, A to Z, A to Z. This space, right, as an example, is it's going to be, it's required if I'm going to have anything else. And then if I put in a star, right, then you can see that the space in the middle, right, because middle name, it says there's a red space in the middle, right, because it says, okay, plus, and then the grouping. If I put a star here, then it invalidates everything. Star is no good for everything else. So star before that part. I need to put a star before this part. So this part will say anything that matches, and it tells me if there's a pattern error, which is really, really good. What about if I want to make this square brackets? Square brackets is kind of alternate, so that's what it means. So it matches this, but not this, right? It doesn't match this at all, because it's basically saying, hey, I need some kind of middle name, that kind of stuff that I want to have. This whole part here is optional. So again, we can take it as far as you want, guys, to match most names, but like first name and last name combinations. A lot of times what we want to do, and I got to be honest, to make our job easier is you split it up over multiple inputs. First name, an input, right? And then we have a middle name, optional. And then we have a last name, and sometimes I say last names, where I can have more than one last name, optional, as an example. And so you kind of compose the whole identity of the person with multiple names. So what do we want to do? Because I think we don't want to take this too far. I think this is probably good enough. Something that looks like, like something that looks like this. We have a dash, so again, if I said, this kind of matches part of it, but not the last part, because it's middle name, last name. And I got two middle names and a last name. What if I had a middle name and then a last name that was hyphenated? Would that be okay? And that's okay. So it'd be like first name, middle name, and a last name that's hyphenated, and that would match, right? So that's pretty good. And this matches a kind of a very short name and kind of a middle length name. Let's try other names here. Very common names like, let's say James Bond. That matches, no problem, right? But if I say, Henry the Fifth, that doesn't match, because the has to be capitalized, and then fifth, that doesn't match at the end, because the fifth, that doesn't match. The space in between here is a problem. It only matches the first part, but it doesn't care about the last part. So it's almost like I want some kind of additional thing to repeat. The whole thing can repeat again somehow, right? And this is where you put in maybe square brackets. The whole sequence can repeat one or more times. So 1 time to, let's say, 2 times. Can I do that? And does it match any of them? The answer is no. right? So we have to think about how to do the whole substring to match, and that's something that we need to look at. Okay, but otherwise, for the most part, it matches a lot of stuff. It's just that we got to be careful about first name, middle name, last name kind of thing. For now, I'm just going to take this sequence and let's use this to build our regular expressions. I've talked about some certain things. By the way, you can always search for common regular expressions. If I say something like, regular expression, here it is for first name, middle name, and last name, right? So I want to say one of those, first name, first name, last name, as an example, or last name, first name, middle name. Here it is for, let's try this one. So it gives us some patterns that we can look at that make sense, right? So it actually gives us like 3 different, and here it's for Java, but it doesn't matter because the regular expressions we're talking about will work in any of those patterns. Now look at what it says. It says //s. So I need a space. That's what this means. And this plus, remember what plus means, right? I need that space. It's required. Plus, if I go back to our magic sequence, it says specifies 1 or more of the preceding characters must match. 1 or more spaces. That's what this means. 1 or more spaces. 1 or more spaces, right? First name, middle name, last name, right? Like this. First name, middle name, last name. But it doesn't specify, and then in brackets, everything is in brackets. Look at that. So there's little sub-expressions that I have in brackets. Okay, let's try one more kind of like a sequence to match. So, okay, so let's try the brackets. So this is the first part in brackets. I must have this, right? Followed by, I must have the last part. I must have the last part, right? First name, some kind of space, and then a last name, but my name doesn't match, right? Of 1 to 25. And let's undo those changes. So let's try that again. First name, but I want to match it with my total match plus this, and then my last name, right? So all these included. So first name and then last name, right? First group, second group, right? Captures it. And then plus some kind of, if we go to the next, the other one, where it says 1 or more matches with, this one, the last name. So if I grab some kind of additional one, I can add it to the end of that one as well. All right, so that's another way I can do it. I can add more stuff here. But this one has a problem because of this part right here. So it does first name and middle name, right? And then it has in the same string this one and this one, but it doesn't match this one. It doesn't match an extra character there. So I'd have to do something like exactly what it says in this one here, where I want to say some kind of, character, which is 1 or more at the ends. Let's try that. If I added that to the ends, well, nothing matches because I've broken my match, right? That's what I've done when I've done this \s sequence. Let's just do this now. So it says, okay, now I'm starting to match, so it says, look, there's the third group, group 3, right? Group 3 is, so group 1 is Tom. Group 2 is, this one. There's group 2. Anything that's red is group 2, right? There's group 2. And group 3 is the last one. So look what it did. It actually captured everything except for this blue one, right? So that's what it does. It didn't capture this one. It captured the first name, middle name, or the last name dash last name dash last name. That worked, but not this other sequence in the middle. So it's kind of cool, again, the way you can learn how to put string these things together. And you can get examples, lots and lots of examples online where we want to, kind of add another one. So if I said like, okay, cool, I want this one, some kind of alternate, and, there must be a space at the end. And to do that, if I was to take this entire sequence again, and add it in again, now remember, this is optional. If I did this, then this matches, right? If I add it on, but this doesn't because I don't have a space after my name, right? So if I did Tom, that would match, no problem, right? But that doesn't make any sense if I have a shorter name like this, or even Al Lowe, James Bond, that doesn't match. So the last part, this whole last sequence, has to be optional, right? Something like optional, something like this. All right. Again, matches a lot, but not this one, because then the last sequence could have some kind of additional character that I put in there. So maybe what I do is I want to extend this even further and kind of put in another one of these, right? Where I have all of that. Henry V wouldn't work though. Henry V, because there is not a match for all the different piece parts, right? And it tells you where all these things are. Henry matches, but because it's so small, doesn't match, right? Because I'm looking for a number of characters in the sequence. So again, this is something where we have to continue to hone and address each of these different piece parts. For now, like I said, I'm just going to go with a simple match. So I'm going to go back to what we had before, which is way over here, right? Because I think that will cover, some basic names, all right? First name, middle name, last name, though, this part right here won't be covered, right? Unless I put in something like an alternate sequence for, so this, let's say, is required. I say that is required. But then anything after, so one or more of those, but then anything after this one here, slash, and then pipe, comma, with a dash, this thing here, this part, right? Then I have to put in, if I put that in there, then I have to put in something like a star, which basically says that any one of these is okay, right? So now it matches all this. And that's what I would probably stick with, this part. That's enough. It wouldn't cover Henry V, right? Because it would be some kind of middle name and last name. A simple middle name last name wouldn't work because I would need another character sequence for this. So I would have to have another first name like this. So let's say I would say, A to Z, followed by, look at this, followed by, if I wanted to cover Henry V, right? Followed by another sequence, A to Z. Let's try this out, right? And then I would make this whole last sequence, which would be in brackets. The whole thing would have to be in brackets like this, and it would have to be optional. And if I did that, then again, look at how Al Lowe doesn't match anymore, because I'm saying, okay, well, I need, the preceding sequence, one or more of these, I need them, right? The space, I definitely need this part, but I'm not specifying how long this is, or if I have a space, it matches this part, but now it invalidates the next one. Options, right? So again, you gotta kind of go through and try some of this out until you get to the right sequence of characters that you want. So let's go back to this. And I think this is okay for now for us. It's not perfect by any means. I would like to make this better. And I welcome you guys to try it out and see what it is. So there's the try regex101.com. If you come up with a better one, we'll use that one. For now, though, I'm just going to grab this sequence, like I said, and I want to make this in code. We've spent enough time playing with regular expressions. So how do we do that? So inside of our code now, right, what I want to do is I want to start matching, pattern matching, and we're going to start with display contact. So display contact uses form validation like this. It says, hey, if this is the length is less than 2. Now we know this is nowhere near as good as it should be. So let's add in a regular expression. So if I say something like let, and we'll call this full name pattern, and we'll say, kind of // right? Because that's where we need to put it. And then we drop in the regular expression. right? And what it does is it says, hey, look, this is a regular expression in VS Code. It actually understands what that is. Okay. And then, right, what I can say is for the regular expression, I want to start testing it. Let's test that regular expression, right? So I can say that I want to put in here, let's try it out. We want to test it to see if it works. So we're going to say, I want, if, and I want the full name pattern, right? So full name pattern dot test, and I want to pass in this part. So the value that we're going to get from the full name. So I'm going to put that part in here. I'm going to test the value, the thing that's inside the input of the full name. I want to test it with the full name pattern we just developed here. Let's put a semicolon. And if that's true, let's do a console log, right? And it'll say something like passed. And if not, let's put an else, and we'll say failed, just to see what that looks like. Console log failed. Okay, so see what that looks like here in the sequence. So passed, failed. Okay, cool. And let's see what this looks like online. So I'm going to go back to here as an example, and let's go into my light server, which is localhost. I'll be okay. Localhost 3000, there it is. And I'm going to go to my contact page and start typing in. Let's take a look here by going into my inspector. And I'll say that, so it failed. So TO and then dash, well, that failed. Even though it passed our old regular expression, our old test, that totally failed the new one. What about Tom and then that failed? What about Tom and T? That failed. What about Tom and toe? That failed. Okay, so that's bad. So I should be able to go Tom low or, Al low. That should be okay, but it keeps on failing, right? What about if I made it longer, like, James Bond, and then go here? That all fails. Everything is failing. So even though our regular expression that we were testing was working, this is all failing for us. Again, let's go back and see what the code tells us that is happening. So again, full name pattern, this is my full name pattern, right? And I've got first name, some number of characters, last name, plus a potential space. Well, we forgot that the space is optional. You got to put that in there, that the preceding space has to be optional. Let's go back and save it and go back. Otherwise, it needs a space at the end. That's what I'm saying. Let's try this again. So Tom low, and then no, it failed because I put my capitals. Tom low, that passed. So you can see that that is okay, right? And just like Al, C, that's okay, that passed. But, and then so does Tom passes, right? Tom Smith passes, right? But what about Tom the fifth? This is going to fail, right? Because, well, that actually passed. But think about what it's doing. It's taking the what I'm getting and I'm patting it in. If I say Tom, Smith, Reese, that passes too. Tom Smith Reese is okay, right? So we're pretty good in terms of what can pass, right? But what about if it's really long, like really huge long, like a very long last name? Then that even passed, right? That even passed, this long sequence, because I'm looking at least 25 characters right in there, at least up to 50, the way I've written it, right? And if I keep going, like a really, really, really long name, that's still passing. So something is quite wrong with our regular expression when it comes to what we're saying it's supposed to be, right? So some kind of sequence, one or more spaces or whatever at the end, and plus it says one or more of these that we're looking at, one or more of these ones, right? That's what this means, one or more. So let's go one more step and then we'll fix it. One or more specifies the preceding character is optional, specifies that the one or more preceding characters must match, right? and we have these regular things here as well. So, I mean, again, we want to go through and, and check out some of these regular expressions. Again, this one's not perfect. Like I said, there's still work to be done on the one we did, but it covers at least a decent full name. A decent full name. It's not terrible. It's not great. Okay. But you can see the challenges that we have. Okay, Nicholas says, I added an asterisk at the end. Is it here what I did, Nicholas? At the end of my asterisk, and it works? Okay, so we're good. So that is what this does. So now, because I can get passing and failing results, I don't need this part. But I need to fail. I'm going to say if my full name test fails. And the way to do that is to take this whole thing, cut it, replace this by that. And then what I want to put is if it fails, I want to say, please enter a valid full name, something like that. A valid full name. This must include at least a first name followed by a last name, right? And we might want to say something like a capitalized first name, capitalized first name followed by a capitalized last name, because I think we need to tell the capital. And we might say instead of capitalized uppercase, we can also use uppercase. But that's the whole thing. Capitalized means just the first name, and capitalized last name. Okay, so that's kind of the sequence. And if I did this and I go back to my code, back to my code now, and if I refresh, it says uncaught syntax error, unexpected token, this at app.js87. That means that in here somewhere, this is wrong, because 87 is, oh, this, I forgot to take this out. Haha. Silly me. All right, so that is good. So let's try this out. So if I say T and then T, it says, please enter a valid full name. This must include at least a capitalized first name followed by a capitalized last name. All right, so something like that. But however, if I do Tom Smith, then we're good. Okay, so this is a little better than what we had before. It must have a space. There must be some additional form, so the validation is slightly better. It's not perfect. By the way, you'll notice that no validation is perfect, because it becomes very challenging to write a very constraining string. It might exclude certain things. But we don't want to just use this here. This is great, but the problem with doing this, this whole sequence, right, as an example, the problem with doing this is that, well, it only works for this contact page. But what about if I have the other thing, right? Because I also have this one. I also have in my show contacts, if I go add contact, I want to be able to do this here too, right? I want to do it here, full name, because I'm doing the same thing. So what I want is instead is to create a function for this. So let's make a new function, and we're going to make a function called test full name. And in my test full name function, I'm going to do all of this, right? So I'm testing the full name, but I need a couple of things. I need my message area. I need that. I need my full name pattern. I need that. And I need all of this. So I'm going to grab all this stuff, cut it, and I'm going to my test full name and paste it in there. Okay. Let's put form validation. Let's take that out and put that where I want it, which is here. This is my form validation I'm going to do in my display contact, right? And notice now my display contact just has a send button, right? Because first I'm going to do the form validation by going to my test full name. So I'm going to call, as an example, test full name here. So test full name will basically test this out. It'll do the message area and blah, blah. Well, then if I can do that here, then going back to my my edit page, which is way down here, can't I do the same thing? So so here's where it would work, right? Before I click the edit button, I want to test to see whatever I have is ready to go, right? So I'm going to do some form validation there, right? Which is going to be test full name. So that's where I want it to be done. So let's see if this works also in the display edit function that I have. Okay. So I go back to this, and here's my add contact. So let's refresh. And if I go T dot, I get that thing. I'm good. Look at that. It added it in, right? So now even in this, I got some validation. This is wonderful. And I want to have this pattern for my contact number and my email address. Let's make those two really quickly. But I'm going to make them as functions, right? Because I know that that's what I need. So all the way up to this. Here's my test full name. Let's do some other functions. So function, I want also to test my contact number. Test contact number. Okay, so I'm just going to put these as separate little functions so you can see them. You can put them as one big function too, by the way, but let's not. Let's put them as separate functions. And then also test email address. Cool. Test full name, right? And let me put them in the right spot. How about putting them in the right spot would be really good, which is with everything else that I have. I meant to put that right here under test full name. So I want to do the same thing with these ones, but I'm not going to redefine, I'm not going to hide my message area the second time. This message area hide thing only for the first name, because otherwise you're going to have that little red mark as we enter the form for the first time, right? So that's one thing I definitely need to put here, but only not the hide, but just the other part. So I want to put in this in here. This is my test contact number now. Let's get rid of the hide part. I still need to make a reference to my message area so I can modify it, so I can turn it on or off. Instead of my full name pattern, I'm going to make it so it's called my contact number pattern. Let's rename this. So right click, I'm going to go to rename symbol to contact number pattern, which is going to rename these two things. And now I need my contact number pattern in here. Let's get that from the PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint, I gave you a couple of patterns for you to use. And one of them is this phone number. Let's grab the phone number pattern and put that phone number pattern in here, okay? So there's my phone number pattern. And this is going to basically say that my phone number is going to be, let's read it. So at the beginning of the string, I'm going to have an optional area that's 1 or 2 characters for my country code. Okay, that's what this does. Then I want a literal, and this is what the slash means. I want a literal character that is, this is the sequence, which is going to be, and if you notice, some kind of number, right? I need 3 numbers that's in here. And this is optional. This whole piece is optional, which means you can include an area code or not. That's what it means, right? So it's not required. It's an option. Followed by square brackets, right? This is something that I want. Some kind of space or dash. Some kind of space or dash, right? And I need a space, dot, or dash. Space, dot, or dash. Space, dot, or dash. And space, dot, or dash means that I will accept anything that's a separator, right? Anything that's a separator from this one. Okay, and now the problem with this one is it's basically saying I must have a space, dot, or dash, but what if I have nothing? Let's make this optional, right? That's one thing we're going to change, as well as, and then I'm going to look for at least 3 characters, right? 3 numeric characters, that's what D means, followed by an optional, we should make this optional, space, dot, or dash. Let's make that optional as well. And then followed by numeric characters that are 4 at the end of the string. We must have 4 characters at the end of the string. So that is my total sequence for my contact pattern. And then I'm going to say on, instead of full name, I'll say contact number, on contact number blur, right? Then I want my contact number pattern to test. I want to test my contact number pattern. If it doesn't match, then I want to give some kind of message in my message box that says, please enter a valid contact number. This should at least include, I will say, sorry, country code and area code are optional. Country code and area code are both optional. But now that's great for back in the past where some country codes, some area codes are optional. But in North America, area codes are required. But I want to tell you this, that in some other places in the world, area codes are not required. Okay, so because there's a limited number of phones and phone numbers. The way they do phone dialing in certain places in the world, area codes, you may not need them, right? So that is the contact pattern. All right, let's test it and see if it works. But I haven't called it test contact number, so I'm going to test my contact number underneath where I test my my phone number, my full name. So test full name. Okay, here's test contact number. I want to put that there, and let's do the same test contact number further down. So where we have our my edit form. This is my edit. This is my display edit, but I also want to do it for my contact, which is right here. All right, so those two things. I want to test my contact number and my full name. Now let's see if that works. So back to this. Then I can say my name is okay, passes. And then when I want my contact number, if I put 416, and it's going to say enter a valid contact number, excuse me, country code and area code are both optional. All right, cool. So if I say 416-555, not enough. 416-555-5555, no problem. And if I wanted to add dashes, no problem. Okay, so it'll do all those things for me. They'll take those, or even commas or dots, because some people like to use dots, or some kind of other things in there. And I've given the option to do whatever you want. Okay, let's do the email now. So the email is this pattern. Okay, this is my email pattern. Let's take a look at that as I do it again. And I'm going to go back to our code for a second. We have our test email address, right? So I want to grab this whole thing again from my test contact number and drag it and drop it into this. Again, we're duplicating, and that should worry you. If I'm duplicating something, that means there's maybe something I can do to make this better, right? But remember, what first thing we do is make it work. Make it work is my motto, right? So let's get this thing, let's rename it. So I'll say rename symbol, and we'll call this the email address pattern, email address pattern, right? So that's what it changed. We're also going to match my email address. So email address, that's what jQuery is going to find for us, right? Email address. Followed by, we need to change this regular expression. Again, we have that here. So I'm going to grab this part. Let's read it and see if we understand what it means again. So what does it mean? It says, if you want to read it with me, and you should start understanding it a little bit more. At the beginning of the sequence, I want, and this is, notice everything here is in brackets. Okay, it says that at the beginning of the sequence, I want to have that square brackets means that I need one or more of these, A to Z, capital A to Z, lowercase 0 to 9, a dot, an underscore, a percent, or a dash. All those things are okay, right, at the beginning of the sequence. That doesn't seem right to me, right? But we'll see. followed by an @ symbol. That's a literal. I need that, right? Followed by A to Z, 0 to 9. So some kind of alphanumeric sequence with a dot or a dash, followed by a literal dot. I need a dot. So I dot something, something.com, followed by A to Z with a minimum characters of 2. So it could be .ca, .co, and a maximum characters of 6, because that's the maximum we have so far. And that is previous to that, that is option. That's what it says. That's what an email address would be. And that's a very flexible email address, my friends. So to me, that is, again, email addresses are super hard to do because it could mean that you have a bunch of things all together. And you want to be too restrictive, because then it becomes, again, something that wouldn't fit some email addresses, and you might exclude certain people. All right, so please enter a valid email address. And I think I'll leave it there, email address, because they know what a valid email address is, right? I'm not going to tell them what, because that is very difficult to match. Email address, names, and phone numbers. You got to think we've kind of tried to validate what people are entering as much as possible, right? Using regular expressions. All right, so let's see if this works. So here's my test email address. Now we got to call it again. Oh man, another function call, test email address. Okay, so I'm testing full name, testing contact number, testing email address. Wow. All right, and then we go back down here. I got to do it again. Test email address. So you know what? If I'm going to do this twice, the exact same sequence, it needs a function. I'm going to wrap it up. So I'm going to say function. We'll just say form validation. And my form validation will call those 3 functions right now, but I could separate them if I want to, right? That makes more sense to me. So I kind of wrap it up. They're just like a little function that calls the other ones. And we also got to consider that these 3 functions are very, very similar, right? So we may be able to get away with calling one function. So let's go back down to this, and then just say form validation here. So form validation, his phone number, and then email address, james.bond007@example.com. That passes, right? But if I was to take out and I say James, it would say no, enter a valid email address. James at, enter a valid email address. James at bond, enter a valid email address. James at bond dot, enter a valid email address. Right, you can see, but if I go C, enter a valid email address. .co, it's good. So this is okay. So it's a pretty good regular expression for what we want. All right, and that's working with add contact. What about our contact page? So if I did the same thing, here's my email address, james.notgood, james at notgood, james at example.notgood.com, no problem. And so it takes that, and that's how you would test it. And it's really good, and it works across the 2 forms that use very similar patterns. Okay, very, very good. We're good to go, and we've done regular expressions, my friends. Regular expressions and form validation is what I wanted to cover today. And we've kind of done more form validation, regular expressions. We've talked about more classes and objects because I made a custom ID. And the last part is creating our login and register forms. Let's put this up on Discord, up on GitHub. I was going to say Discord. So let's do that because we've done some stuff. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added form validation with regular expressions. If I can spell anything today. Git push. and that you'll now have everything that's online. Tom says, I can still send even if validation is incorrect. Absolutely. I can still send, I can't send the form. So if I was to try and, so this is just form validation. But one thing that's missing, and you're absolutely right, is if I go back to my page. So if I go back to my page here, what about if I refresh the page? Can I click send and does it do anything? Well, this doesn't allow me to do it. It says, please fill out this field. So it doesn't, empty fields are no good, right? It won't allow me to do this. And that is something that it won't allow, right? For sure. It won't allow me to do that. It'll target me here where it says full name and blah, blah. But the problem that I have left is if I go into some kind of edit and I delete everything from a spot, let's say, for example, I go like this and then go to the next line or click edit now, it'll allow that to happen, right? I can edit that. I can edit that and it would allow it. It would just make that email address undefined, you know, that kind of stuff. It would mess up, right? So now the one thing I need, and let's just delete this one. The one thing I need from you know, for me, right, to make that part work, this is the last part, and thank you, Tom, for that. If I go to edit, this part is I can't have any fields that are empty. I can't have an empty field, right? So that is something else. And that will take me a little further into form validation, right? So what I can do is I can check to see if it won't allow me to go if somehow I press the button if there's any empty fields. Okay, so that is the send button or the edit button that I have to do, right? And then I got to give some kind of feedback to the form that tells me, well, you can't do that because the fields are empty. So when I click the edit button, right, as an example, inside of the form, display edit, I do form validation, and then I say, okay, cool. So form validation is basically saying, okay, everything is entered correctly, as an example. But what if I just skip to pressing the edit button? That skips all this. And I could do that because none of my buttons in my edit form are a submit button. They don't submit anything. They don't submit the form, right now. And so that is a problem. And why don't they submit the form? Well, there's two reasons why. One is my submission actually does something, right? So if I go back and if I go to the form itself, so let's say if I go to my edit form, notice that my edit button is just a button. It's just a button, okay? And what I can do is if I make this button a submit button, okay, does it do the same things? Let's see if it changes anything. The cancel button's got to stay as a button because it can't be reset anymore. But the edit button, the one problem is that I made it a button for a second because I wanted to test it. Let's see if I make it turn it back into a submit on the front end. Will it stop things? So let's go back, and I'm going to go back to my form just to fix that bug that Tom found for us, right? So again, if I refresh the screen, why is it giving me 3? Sorry, I just want to make sure I got this right. And it says 3. Where's my console? Oh, here's a key. I got this console log here that I don't need to. We can get rid of that. So there's the console log. And here's Peter Parker because I'm editing number 3. And if I go back and I go add contact and then I click add, it should stop me. It should stop me from going to the next level. It shouldn't allow that to happen. See, it did that. It did it, right? Because it validated everything and it went on anyway. So let me explain this, why it did it, okay? Because even though I put the submit on, right? Let's take a look at that. Here's my display edit. And then I on-click, it checks to see if everything is there. It does its little business, right? And then I create my item and blah, blah, blah. right? So this is an issue. Why did it work? Why did it not stop me, as an example? Well, I don't have a prevent default here. Okay, I'm just letting you know. So edit button dot click the function. Let's just comment this out for 1 sec. Okay, I'll make a block comment, and then we'll see what the difference is. Because what it should do is start checking, right? So this is my edit button. So let's get rid of this. We don't care about this. Let's try that again. So add, and then click add. Okay, so now it says full name, contact number. That's how it should work, right? Okay, now let's start putting the stuff back. All right, let's start putting stuff back. So if I can click on it, right, then everything is going to be okay, right? If I don't do anything with the on button, right? So how can I check? Is there a way to check that the form is valid with HTML? So again, going back to our thing, check if form is HTML form is valid. HTML form is valid, right? And programmatically using jQuery, right? You can look at the form ID valid. This is actually a thing with jQuery, and it says where the form ID is a form that has already had a validate called on it. Okay, that's interesting. That's with jQuery. How about with JavaScript for a second? Valid with JavaScript. Okay, and I'm pulling this up because this is just a little wrinkle that we have. Form field validation with HTML and a little JavaScript, right? And it tells us some additional things to do. It gives us regular expressions. Back to that. Well, we already did regular expressions, but I want to see if the check validity works, right? And it says it works for all browsers, including IE10 and iOS. This is way back in the day, obviously. And it says, can I use check validity for a particular email field? Look at that, email field check validity, all right? And if it's not correct, right, then it's gonna be a problem. So that means I can use the HTML stuff as well. So what if I did that? If I said, before I did this, and this is another check that I can use, I can say that, hey, let's check the full name, right? So I want to check full name. And if I start typing validity, form validation, or is valid, you can see that it doesn't give me that with this, is valid or check validity, because this is jQuery, right? But if I use, maybe if I use something like JavaScript, it'll work, right? So if I say something like, hey, I want to document.get element by ID, and I want to look at a particular element, which is my element, which is full name. Can I do a check validity? There is nothing like that, right? I don't have check validity there. It doesn't even come up. Even if I type in valid, right? How about the form, right? If I said document.forms and I want to get the first form and I said something like check, that I can check. I can check if the form has validity, right? The whole form itself, right? And that is, if I did this, check validity, it says returns whether the form will validate when it is submitted without having to submit it. Okay, so that is pretty cool, validity, right? So it checks to see if the form is working, and it doesn't prevent default behavior this way, all right? So what I can do, is there a way to get the form with jQuery? Because we want to use jQuery here, right? So can I do the same thing with jQuery? So let's go and check jQuery. Again, this is just to, thank you, Tom, for specifying a problem, right, with our form, right? Because we're like, hey, wait, something is wrong. Can I do, and I'll say with jQuery now, jQuery, because I want to use jQuery, and there's something called a validation plugin that I have to use with jQuery. to do that. And do I need it? Do I want to do it? Is the question, right? Or form is valid without the plugin, right? Because it should basically give us the form with jQuery. So let's see what it says. And it says blah, 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 and then .valid. If the form ID is .valid, okay, that's the form ID, but we'll actually do that thing. Can I do it with valid? So I say, hey, I want the form ID, right? And I could look for a form, right? A form element, and that's what it is, and then .valid, right? And even though it doesn't show up, if it was something that was working with jQuery without a plugin, it would come up. And unfortunately, it does not. So let's use a little bit of JavaScript here to do it instead. All right. By the way, if you were to search on jQuery.com, let's do that. That's also something we should probably do. jQuery.com, and we should search for our API documentation and go to valid, right? And see if there's anything that comes up with, valid, right? And it doesn't, right? Doesn't come up, right? Because it doesn't matter if this is the way it would work for sure, right? If I look at plugins, then we might see, like for form plugins, other things we can add in. As an example, if I wanted to use some kind of valid, right? So you can see that there is nothing that comes up that has valid in there. So I recommend, instead of using something like that, just to make it easier, let's just do this, check validity, and see what happens. And this will return a Boolean, so true or false, if it's working. And I'm looking at the first form on the page. I can also do a, all forms if I really want to, but I want the first form, and I only have one on the edit page. So let's try this, and I'll say if, we'll do this little test. If the form is valid, if I return positive, if I return true, then and only then, then and only then do I want to allow my button to be pressed to go forward into this location. That's what's causing me to move, right? This thing here. So let's see if this works. So if I go back to our page, let's go back to edit and refresh. And if I click add, it's going to say, nope, it won't allow me to, right? If I fill in some stuff, now I'm not doing any validation other than, it's not going to add anything to my form. But let's say, for example, I say Tom Smith, phone number, and email address. And if I click add, then that will take me to the next place. That will actually submit my form. Okay. So that's good. That's what I want to do, right? All right, but that does some funny stuff. That actually, if check validity passes, it's supposed to do this. That's what it did. But notice it didn't go anywhere. It didn't go back to my page. Well, that's because, and this is something that I've done, when I click submit, right, without submitting the form, without submitting, I want to do it. Well, that means that in my form itself, so going back to my edit form, edit.html, let's turn that back into a button. Okay, turning it back into a button. If I did that and clicked add, it's not going to work, right? But also it doesn't give me any feedback, right? Okay, I'm just testing with you to show you that there's options for this. So if I go back to submit, this is good, but it submits the form, right? It submits the form. Let's go back to this. It submits the form, and then what happens is it takes the submission of the form in mind, right? So how do I submit the form and go to my contact list.html? So it goes back to something. Well, remember, the forms have some specific qualities, right? And one thing to note is if I go back to the form itself, which is my edit form, then at the top where I do my form itself, right? So if I go to the form, this one. So if one thing it has is a MDN reference, right? And if I go to forms for my MDN reference, it's going to show me how forms are laid out and any kind of properties that they have, right? It's actually built into, so it has an accept and auto capitalize, auto complete, a name, kind of a link, creates a hyperlink or annotation depending on the value, right? As an example, action is what it does. So the URL processes the form submission, and this value can be overridden by form action attribute or a button, input type equals submit, or input type equals to image. Okay, so this is these things. So action. Method is post, get, or dialog. This is forms that we talked about before. Post and get, submit in a certain place, right? And then target. So here's some examples. Here's my form. Here's a form method of post, right? But what I want is a form action, right? So a form action is what? If I go to the action, it says the URL that processes the form submission. Okay, what if I did that? What if I went up here and I said, this form, blah, 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 and then I said action equals to, and then some kind of URL, and I want to take it back to contact list.html. What if I did that? And go back to my app.js, right, and not do this, right? Well, actually, it will do this, but I don't need this anymore is what I'm saying. I'll check to see if this is valid. If it's valid, then it'll allow me to do submit. That's what it'll allow me to do is submit, right? It'll do the rest of the stuff if it's only if it's valid, right? So let's see if that works. So I'm just going to take this out now, and I'm going to uncomment this part right here. I want to do all this work now that I did before, right? So I only want to do this work when, if and only if the form is valid. So I don't want to submit the form if it's not valid. Sorry, I'm just going to time out here, and I don't want to with you guys, right? Because of Tom's question. It's not your fault, Tom. It's my fault because I didn't cover this. So, so how does this work? Let's see if it even works at all. So I'm going back to this, and let's use localhost 3000. Going to go to contact, and I'm going to go to contact list right now and add my contact and click add. Does this, it gives me my form field, kind of expressions. And now what I'm hoping is that when I go Tom Smith and 416-556-5556, and my email address is tom.smith@example.com, I filled in everything. If I click add, it's going to take me back to this. And it also added me in, Tom Smith. That's the way it's going to be. So that does the form validation. So what I did was, and here's a question, do I really need this part now? Location.href, right? Because my form action does that already, right? And let's try it again. Let's comment this out. So no more location.href in the form, right? If I go back to this and click add, let's add another one. So we'll say, do we have James Bond? I think I have. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Tom Smith. Oh, I got two Tom Smiths. Let's delete one. But let's add James Bond now. So James Bond, another character. So I'll say James Bond. If I click add now, it's going to do a couple things. It won't validate. It'll give me both things, fill out this field and do my validation. Pretty good, huh? And on top of that, it'll ask me for the contact number 416-555 or 556-5556 and my email address. Click add. It's going to say no, fill out this field. But if I add it in, james.bond@example.com, I do that and press add. Now it adds it in, and I have James Bond added twice. James Bond added twice, and I got Tom Smith. What did it do? Looks like a much longer list, no? Once, twice, 3 times, actually, it did for me. Once, twice, 3 times. So, yeah, that needs to be there, right? Because it actually did. Let's try that again. And so those are all those things. Let's go back to our code and put that location.href back, right? And if I go back and add it again, then it only adds it twice, not 3 times. Why does it add it twice? And that's the crazy thing. So why does it do that twice? Well, it's an remember we had this problem before, right? When we did that, we had this problem before, right? And the reason why it's good right now, but it's bad in that there's this thing triggers twice. This whole thing triggers twice, right? So what it does is it sets up the key. As an example, here's my key, and my key is going to be calculated because I don't have a key already. So it's going to do it twice because I don't have a key. It's going to submit this thing one more time. So it's a bit of a bug, to be honest, right? Where I do my check validity, right? Because what's happening is it says, okay, cool, I see you. I see the check validity stuff. It's okay. But, you know, I won't even allow you to click the button to even do this edit part. Now, here's something we can try. What if I took the if statement and wrapped my button? Well, that means the button wouldn't even be good unless my form is valid. My button wouldn't even be registered as an event unless I had everything in there, right? And then I could, you know, submit my form and all that kind of stuff and go to my contact list for processing, right? Because that's what it's going to do. It's going to do it once, right? And the other thing I can do is instead of on, right, we can also use one. And one means it'll only register it once. So it'll only work one time. This is actually a really nice convenience function, the one, right? Let's try this again and let's go fix it. So if I go back here, let's get rid of the second James Bond and the first James Bond. Let's get rid of those two things. Now there's only one. Let's add them in again. So now this time I'll go here and I'll say James Bond and then 416-555-5 or 556-5556 and then james.bond at example.com and click add, and we should only have one James Bond now, which happens right here. So what I can do then is I'm only allowing, let's go back and check. Wait, it added it twice, but at different place, different times, right? It added here and here. Go back to my, that should not have happened actually. Application, sorry, I just want to make sure that what we have here. So I have, you can see that all these things are numbers that have happened. Let's see James Bond. So James Bond is here, and James Bond is also here. 6493. So 3 milliseconds afterwards, it did it again. So it actually triggered it twice. It triggered it twice, this edit button, and it shouldn't. Even though I put in one. Again, a bit of like sorcery when it comes to what it's doing. This shouldn't do that. If I put one, if you notice it says add attach an event handler to the elements, this handler is executed at most once per element per event type. One or more space separated events. So one thing we could do if you want this to be the other way, we could turn it off. That's another thing we can do with events. So once this button is clicked and I'm inside here and I go to my location, I could turn it off. I could say that this button on click, I could turn it off because there's also an off. And I could do that. I could say that, okay, I want to turn off the ability for me to click that button again. I'm not sure if this is going to do it more than once because what's happening is this event is triggering so quickly and it's asynchronously. This is why this may not work as well, is because this is happening twice. It's going in here and then it's going in here again. Okay. So even if I do this on and off strategy, it still may not work because of the way the events are working. And because the page is actually refreshing, that's what it's doing. Okay. So let me just delete these one more time, and then I swear I'll finish off with this part. No matter what happens here, we'll just finish up. So again, James Bond. Sure, whatever. And I think it's going to add it twice again because of my button click. Yeah. So even if I did that, you can see that it added it twice. And it's because my button click, every time I click my button, my mouse button, right? If I hold it down, right, on an event, let's say I hold my button down like this for a little bit long, right? Then what it's going to try and do, at least this one, what it does, it tries to validate. But if I hold it down even for a second or like a little bit of a time, it'll actually trigger this thing more than once. It is still a submit. If I don't make it a submit, let's take the submit off. Okay, so if I only want this to trigger once and I don't make it a submit, if I go back to my edit, right, and I take it off the submit, I make it a button, then what happens is, if I try this again, let's try, first of all, let's go back to the contact list and get rid of our James Bond guy one more time. And we're just using this as an example. So now it's not a submit anymore, it's a button. And if I go to add and I go to Tom, and if I click add, it doesn't do the validity part. It doesn't check that anymore, right? Although it doesn't allow me to enter either. It doesn't give me this feedback, but it doesn't let me to go forward either. I can't click this more than one time. And my problem is I can't escape, right? So if I go James Bond, and if I go 416.556, 5556, and james.bond at example.com, we're not going to get that feedback that we got last time. So if I click the add button, because I've removed, I undid it. This is an example of off. Once I go there the first time, it tests and then it stops it from happening, right? So if I go back, and if I go back to my app.js, it's ordering, right? So I went in there and it won't allow me to do it, right? If I take this off, and I'm only going to allow the click to work, to do all this work, if it's valid, that validity still works whether I submit or not. But my HTML5 form validity part that comes up with checks, that won't matter. So here's an example. So if I do it again, so I say James Bond, let's add in proper stuff. And then james.bond at example.com. One thing we're missing now is that HTML5 default validity, but it now works. And when it comes to James Bond, it only enters it twice. Here's once, here's twice. And the reason why it did that is because of the same problem that we had before when it came to that. All right, so, and your submit only works once, mine submit works twice, which is this might be just a glitch on my end. Because I'm also running it with a light server, as an example, and I have multiple versions of my page up, whatever. But the idea is the same. The idea here is that, that you want to try and validate to see if the form is valid before you click, right? And if the form is valid, if and only if that's true, then you're allowing the click to happen, right? So you're not allowing the click event to form at all, right? The challenge. So again, one last thing. The last thing we can try, I swear this is the last thing. Last thing we can try is try and put the edit button inside the validity check, right? So we can kind of do one of these. So I can say, okay, we don't even have a button until the form is valid. The button's not going to even do anything until the form is valid. That's what we're saying here, right? So if the form's not valid, then we're saying don't even click the button, right? Don't even allow the button. Don't even register an event handler if the form is not valid. So first check to see if the form is valid, and then register an event handler. And when you do, get the heck out of there, right? But the reason why it's entering it twice, in my opinion, is probably because in my edit.html at the top now, in my form, right, I'm actually doing this, the form action, which is the contact list. That's something that we have to remove. All right, so if I took off the contact list, again, this is all like tweaking, but what happens if I do that now? If I go here, this doesn't even register, it doesn't do anything, and doesn't even get any feedback either, right? So I could give feedback that says, hey, your form is empty, right? So going back to this, form, sorry guys, I will get to it, I swear. I only have 10 minutes left. For your ice, this is just, you know, so I could put at the end something like some kind of feedback in the message box that kind of shows that feedback. But the problem with this is that I've got to have a reference to my message box, which I don't right now. I need to get it because we took it out and we put it inside of all of our tests, right? So I need to do one of these. I need to do at least that. And I want to be able to hide and show that whole structure has to be inside of this as well, right? So in the top, I did my form validation, and this is this structure is only in my form. So then right before I check my validity, I'm going to do this, get a reference to my message area. And if it's false, then I want to show the same kind of message that I did in my my form. So trigger a message that says, hey, you're wrong, something's wrong, right, kind of thing. And put that in the else area. So else, trigger a message that says something's wrong, your form is empty, one or more fields in your form is empty, error, you know, something like that. One or more fields in your form is empty, right? Or are empty. Okay, so whatever, I think it is empty. And then, but if it's good, right? If you actually fill it in now, then we should turn that off when it's valid. So we can say something like, hey, message area dot hide, right? We want to hide the message area. You know, this is message area dot show, but here we're going to hide it if it's valid, right? So again, going back then, it says one or more fields in your forms are empty because it comes in here and right away, in the first case, it is empty, which means that I've got to message area hide right away, right? Before we get to this. So I got to do a hide first, check my validation, right? And if my validation is wrong, show it, okay? But it's going to always show that because I'm checking my validity before I go on, right? So, you know, this is a merit message, this is a problem. This is a loop that we're working with, right? So now if I try it, let's try this out. So James Bond, again, this is not the final version. You can see that that's okay because one of them is okay, right? But if I click add now, it says one or more of your fields. It says, please enter the stuff or whatever. It tells me to enter it. So, and who cares what it says there because it's not going to work. And then if I go here and click add, nothing works because, and that's why I told you it doesn't work, because on validity, it went through the check, right? And because I didn't add the button in here first, then it had all this other trouble, right? So that's why it did what it did. So let's get rid of all this. This is not something that I would want in there, right? The check validity part is okay, but I probably want to put the check validity inside of my edit. I'm just not going to do it right now. I'm just going to take it completely out. For you guys, it's okay for now. And what I'll do is I'll work it out so I figure out the glitch. There's a bit of a glitch you have to work out. And instead of me figuring it out here live and troubleshooting and going and researching on how to do it exactly, for this particular use case, for other use cases, it's easy. But for this one, we've got a special custom way of doing stuff or whatever. And we're using jQuery and whatever. This is going to be fine. Okay. And it allows you to enter empty information. The quick way to also do it, and I won't do it with you, but the quick way to do it is to check to see here if the stuff is empty. And if you click enter, you can throw a message in here in your button that says, hey, your form is empty, you know, kind of stuff. Try it again, right? All right, that's enough. Let me show you a couple things. What I wanted to do here was I also supplied you with some help. I wanted to give you some help for your lab 2. Okay, lab 2 is coming up. And one thing I did inside of, let's just kill this whole thing for a second. So I got an extra version of it here. One thing I did in your up on DC Connect is inside of your lab area here, your in-class exercise, there are 2 pages that I've included, an example login page and an example register page. Let's quickly add those pages in so you have them for your lab. So what you can do is if you go to these pages, if I go to click on this, it's going to take me to a little gist. So GitHub doesn't just have links, it also has repos, it also has gists. And what you can do is you can download this whole form, or you can copy paste it. So let's say here's my login form. So I can copy the whole login form and go back to my code and add in a login form. Let's add it in. So I'll add in login.html, and I'll also add in register, just since we're at it, register.html. In my login form, I've already built it for you to help. So I can paste, there's my login form. And let's do the same thing for register. So again, up on DC Connect, then you can see that there is a register example page. So here's my register page, and I can again copy the whole thing or download it if you really want to. I'm not going to download it, and paste it in here. And this will give me kind of examples of register pages, and it also gives me so register and login pages. That's what those 2 things do, login and register. And what I want to do is I also need to register these 2 pages in my little app switcher, which is going to happen down here. I need to add at least 2 of them. So let's add 1 and 2. And let's just space this properly. And we'll call this login and register. And we'll say display login. We don't have that function yet. And display register. When that happens, it'll have its own little thing. So register. And let's add in those empty functions. Let's say add them just above here. We're going to deal with that next week. So again, it's function display login and function display register. These are just, a couple functions we have. We're not going to do anything right now, but login and register will work, and it won't have an issue, switching through. It'll detect the login and register page. And if you look at the login page, just at the top of the page, it says login, and at the bottom of the top of the page for register, it says register, right? As an example, let's see what those pages look like. Well, there's something missing. I've also given you in the content right now, we have app CSS, which is empty, but up on DC Connect, I've also given you an example of of CSS for my login and register pages. So let's look there. So you can see that here's the CSS for that. So I'm just going to copy all this. And let's go back to my code and add that CSS in here to support my login page. It's not perfect. There's still some issues which we're going to fix next week, but I've added some stuff in here to make sure that it works. And when I go back, and if I want to run this page now, so save it and go and run the page. So let's go to here, and I can type in login.html. You can see it does this. So this is the page that I was looking at last time for you. It's almost perfect. There's some stuff that's missing. It's not quite working exactly how I want, but this is kind of our template for next week. And I've also given you the register page, which you can also get. So you got your login and register pages, and they're going to help you with lab 2. That's why I know instead of you making it, I've given you kind of a starter, and these are that. That's what I want to do. So for your in-class exercise, the stuff that you need, I don't care about so much the register and login pages because I just gave you those. But what I do need for sure is, oh yeah, look at this. It even modified the contact page. It put the contact above and not left. Again, we're going to have to fool around with the CSS a little bit. But all I really care about is I can see this. If you show me this as an example, and if you showed me this, notice that it put the this above. I have to modify the CSS so it doesn't do that. Then we're good to go. If you show me this page here, the add page that says add contact, that means a lot of the work we did was good. Those are the two screenshots I need, this and this. That's good enough for me. Okay, and let's put this up on GitHub, and then we're good to go for today. So again, I'm going to go over here and say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say added login and register pages with CSS. That needs to be changed, and then git push. That is all you need. One thing to note is if I go up on my GitHub page, so let's go back up to my GitHub page for 1 second here. And if I look at github.com Durham Programmer, and if I look at ICE4B, ICE4B has a deployment. Remember, I've been deploying automatically ever since that whole time. And we can actually look at the deployment and check it. And if I do, then if I go to my contact page, it's going to look like the new contact page with these things above. We're going to fix later. But my show contact list has edit and delete buttons that work, and a contact page that takes me here, which works live. So these are all things that you can check out. And the biggest problem is this, the one line in my CSS. And if you wanted to fix this, try it on your own, because we modified the CSS for the page. So if you look at app.css here, and this is a hint, input group add-on, it says it's dark gray and all this kind of stuff. It kind of takes the thing. There's also the first child, which is border right, and it does a bunch of other things, right? So it changes the Z index. It also changes a bunch of other stuff that moves things, the login and login input. It changes it to light gray, different colors on the page. So it does what it's supposed to do, right? But one thing is that it also modifies one of our children. And if you look at, if you want to always inspect the page to see what's been done. So let's say I go here and inspect element. So inspect. I'm clicking right there on my element. If I go inspect, then it'll actually take me to that one element that I'm expecting. And I can look on the right to see which one of my, what am I doing, right? And which CSS is taking hold to modify that element. So you can look through it. And if whatever CSS is affecting this element here, right, this span, which is input group text, right, that's this one right here, right? What if you want to see what is affecting that, then you can look at your CSS that's taking hold. These are all the things that are working with my CSS to modify. But the one thing we know is that this part here is input group text. Input group text is what I'm modifying. So if I go back to here and if I look at anything that says input group text, if there's anything like that, I know I have input group by itself, but we can look for which one of these things is affecting it. You can also turn them off and on. You can also comment it out, see what it does, comment it out, see what it does. And these are the things that you can do as well to figure out which one is affecting it. But notice that this one here, this full name, where it says full name, this whole thing is also inside of an input group object. There's my input group object, and you can see again the style that's affecting it on the right. Here's my style, right? And this whole style that's being affecting. This whole style is taking effect, and you can see which elements are being affected by which CSS. So now inside here, there's also this part, input form control, right, as an example. And it's always the last thing that we've done that modifies things. So our code, right, if we're going to see our app.css, look at this, app.css, input group, form control, last child, right? It actually tells us which one it is. This one here is taking away. It actually has adding a border top radius of 0. And this is where our form is being affected, the input group form control and input group form control last child. Those two objects, you can see that that's where our stuff is taking hold. And you can actually turn them off here live to see what it does, if it does anything. So if there's anything in there, Same thing with position relative. We can play with these values in real time. Look at that. And that's what it is, the width of 100%. If we played with that, if we took the width of 100% off, then it would go back to normal. And that's all we need to do. Go into input group form control. Let's do that now since we're here. Input group form control, and take out this width is equal to 100%. And if you did that and saved it, then you see that all our forms are back to normal. And I can also go back into my login form. Login. And now my login form looks okay. All right, that's it for me, guys. I've done way more than I wanted to today. We're over time by 6 minutes or so, and I want to let you guys go. I want you guys to have a great weekend. I'm going to put this up on GitHub, the last changes. I'll say git add dot, git commit -m. I'll say modified, or I'll say fixed bug with CSS, git push. That should work. Okay, so thank you so much for sticking around. I know I went through a lot there with you, but I wanted to give you a sense of what to be done. There's more to be done, like Tom said earlier. Okay, there's more to be done with what we have. We've done part of it. We need to do a bit more, and we need to work it. It just takes more time to figure things out. We can still do better with our regular expressions, and we can still do better with our form validation. There's still more things we can do. Thanks so much, Tom. And one thing that we also have to consider is this. Remember that JavaScript can be turned off, that this level of validation is only the first level. We're going to learn how to do validation on the back end, which is we want to do both front end and back end validation in order for us to have everything working. Otherwise, people can turn off the front end and they can still make it work on the back end, right? Which is bad. Right? They can still send our stuff to the back end. You broke your contact list. Guess I'll spend some time working on that. Thanks so much, Tom. Thank you for all your support and everything else, guys, for coming out this morning. And I'll see you guys next week. Good luck on your in-class exercise. Just take care of those two things and you're good to go. All right. See you later and good luck. Take care.